Hello, welcome to another Ionic tutorial. Today we're going to extend on the work that we did a couple of weeks ago in order to create dynamic forms. And the forms are based around the idea that when you create any kind of form builder, form group form within Angular 2 this is, you take your form builder, you do a .create, and then you start adding the properties. So for example, we have this simple object up here, the first name, last name, just a person. And if I wanted to make sure all the details from here were inside the actual form that is created by this, I would have to create the first name, then I would have to go and create the last name, etc, etc. Now, when you've got a very complicated object or with many properties, that becomes quite difficult to do. So I'm going to show you a way that you can do all that by only actually bothering to declare the ones that actually require some kind of validation of some description, but the rest of them don't. Now, last time I actually showed you how to do this for a simple object, but when you start talking about more complicated objects, such as an address, which inside, would require, emerald, emerald, I can't spell emerald, emerald city, and line 2, Dorothy, I don't know, just whatever. Okay, so you've got your object which you want to be able to map inside here without then going inside here and doing address, and then I can't remember what you have to do inside there now. Okay, I have a bit of code I would like to show you. So here is our object. We have a person. It's just on the home, so it's just when it loads. We have a person, first name, last name, height, age, what you saw in the tutorial last time, which I'll put a link to in the description. You have the address, you have a couple of vehicles. So we have a couple of complex objects here, an address and vehicles. Now, to see the interface that sit behind this, so you get the idea, you got the person, and inside the person you've got the vehicle array, and you've got an address, which is these are the two objects right here. So there's your address, real simple, line 1, line 2, city, and then the vehicle, reg number, make, color. Nothing too complicated, but we want to be able to make use of this. Now, I was trying to do a video where you could actually see me do this whole thing, but it was going to take too long. So I'm just going to show you the end code. Now, if you remember last time, we have this form generator, excuse me, and this form generator, you gave it a schema. So if we start from the person, and the schema was this part here, so you can say, oh, okay, I've got my object of person, and I want to give it a first name and a last name, because those two require actual validation. The other fields, which was height and age, do not require any validation whatsoever. So what we can do with this originally was we could pass this through, get it generated from inside our home controller to create it. So person form generator, create, and the form we got back included all of these properties. However, if you want to include other more complicated properties, such as the address and vehicles, would require something else. So the something else is this. What we now have on the form generator, this has been extended out a bit. So I explained quite well what all this stuff up to here did. You created your form. We've gone from set value to patch value to patch the original. So this is, if you imagine this is a person, to build up the form and then add the data in. Now, we have this new chunk of code down here, which says if one of the parameters we're passing from the inherited classes is has a property called complex mapper, we are going to make use of the complex mapper. Now, I will show you a complex mapper so you can get the idea. If I go into the person form generator, we can see we've got the schema as you saw before, and we have this complex mapper. And we have vehicles and we have address. So up here we've got a vehicle form generator provider and an address form generator provider. If I go into the address form generator provider, it looks pretty much exactly the same, although this time it doesn't actually have the complex mapper mentioned, but it does have the city where they required. Now, if I have a look at the address, once again, just so you can see it, line 1, line 2, city. So we can say that the city has validation, line 1 and 2 do not. Like I said, it's just joke data at the moment. Same for vehicle. So we have a vehicle form generator over here, reg number, make. The idea behind this is simple. What we're going to do is we're going to recursively go through each level of the actual form, and anything that requires clever mapping, such as the complex arrays and complex properties, we can do it right here. So if I just show you this piece of code and show you what's going to happen. First of all, it'll check to see we have that complex mapper. So in the case of the person, it will do. Inside there, it will iterate through all the different properties that lay inside there. Grab the prop. So if you remember before, from here, that would be the vehicles and the address. And the first thing it'll do is it will try to work out if the original object is an array or if it's just a simple property. If it's an array, what it'll do is it's going to execute this chunk of code here, and it will create an array form builder object. Then it'll iterate around the original objects within that array, and it will create complex mapper versions of that, add it to the array, and then add the array to the original form. Like for like, if it is not that, if it is a complex, if it's a not an array, if it's just a regular property, an object rather, it will create that single object and then add that to the control, to the original form, which is great. So what that will now mean is that when it's iterating through all the different layers, and we'll do a breakpoint in a minute so you can see it, it will hit them all and create them. So real world demo time. I'm going to, first of all, I'm going to go inside, where are we looking? In the providers, in the form generator. So I'll just put a breaker there for a second. I'll refresh you. Okay, so we have hit, first of all, if I look at data, we can see we have our original object. So this is the actual real object. Inside we have the address, and we also have the vehicles as well. So, and we're going to say these are all the actual properties that we want to add to our form. And then, but what we're going to do is we're going to filter some out. So now we've only got height and age. And then we'll just add keys to add to the schema so we can see height and age again. Now we have built our form and we've added the value. So at this point, if I do form.value, we can see we've got a simple form, Joe, blogs, height 180, age 30, and that's it. But there is no address, there is no vehicles. So now, because we have a complex mapper, we will step into this chunk of code. So I'll just remove some breakpoints. Okay, first thing we're going to test is vehicles. Is the vehicle array an array? So obviously, by the way I say that is obviously true. So we now have tested that this is an array, so we'll build an array. And inside there, if I do data prop, at this point, we can see that we are actually inside the vehicle object. So now what it'll do is it's going to, I won't step through this too much, but we can see now that this child array form item dot value is said object. So that is the first vehicle. So we push that in, and we'll go to the second one, push the second one. So now if I have a look inside our child array and have a look at the value of that, we can see we've got the two different vehicles inside there. Boom, boom. We'll add that to our form, and then next time we'll just put a breaker on the second one. So you can see now we are inside address, and so it stops inside address. It'll now create our address. So if I do child form there, oh, do it with a value, sorry. We can now see that we have the address. Good. So now, put a breaker just there for a sec. So now our original form, which originally, if you remember, only had the simple properties, didn't have the complex ones, now has first name, last name, height, age, vehicles, just drill that down, and address. So we have the full address, we have all the vehicles, we have everything. And we've only had to declare very few properties. If I now press play, we can now see said form. I've just formatted it so it looks okay on the screen. So now if we try to invalidate, down here we have this form valid equals true. So if I do, for example, the address Emerald City, it now says false, as you can see, because there was validation, if you remember on that. Type something back in there, we have validation okay again. Same on this side for the vehicle. So these are the array objects now. If I go into here, remove the reg number, we can see once again false, false with our red lines. Type something in, still remains false, is now true. So as you can see, this allows us to build very complex objects, but then be able to add validation at every single level and not require us to write out every single property. Anyway, that's all for today. Thank you very much.